Hi, I'm Kelly Caplan with Lawyers Weekly. Joining me today for today's Sidebar Conference is Joe Urban, a member with Clark Hill in Birmingham. Thanks for being here today, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Kelly. I'm very interested in the topic of discussion today.
All right, and that topic is going to be COVID-19 and back-to-school protocols. See, Joe is advising many school districts around the state about COVID-19 and what those protocols are. In June, Governor Gretchen Whitmer issued Executive Order 2020-142, which provides a structure to support Michigan schools as they plan their return in the fall. So, Joe, what are the high points? What are the key points from this executive order?
So the key points of the executive order that we all need to keep in mind, and it's going to be a little bit of refresher from prior executive orders, is that the state is divided into 8 regions. We've got the Detroit region, we've got Kalamazoo, we've got Grand Rapids, and et cetera, until you hit 8 regions for the state. And each one of those regions is going to find itself in a different phase in the state's reopening plan. So the Executive Order 2020-142 builds on that baseline and says that if your school district is located in a specific region and it's in a specific phase, there are certain activities that it should undertake or should consider undertaking.
Okay, so school districts have to adopt this preparedness and response plan. So what are the issues with this plan, and how are they going to vary from, district to district or even within a district?
So the nice thing about the plan is it's flexible based on where the school district finds itself in the region or phase it finds itself in, but allows for local school districts to make changes based on where they are and how their stakeholders react to the COVID epidemic. So for example, the plan contains required, highly recommended, and recommended components. And depending on the phase and the region you're in, you have to apply the required components, which we can talk about in a second. And then there are the highly recommended components, which you can pick from and apply as you see fit in your district. And then there are recommended, which don't necessarily relate to the science, but actually relate to additional things that might be best practices that districts have been doing.
Okay, so from a legal perspective, kind of talk me through those 3 different, the required, the strongly recommended, and the recommended for the plan.
Sure. Let's say that we're in a school district. Phases 1 through 3 of the reopening plan are the most restrictive or the most locked down. In those phases, you're not going to have in-person instruction. That's required, that you provide your instruction remotely. It's required that in providing your instruction remotely, you are able to give not just general and regular ed students access to the materials, but also tailor the materials and your attention to make sure that special ed students are also getting an educational benefit from the process. If you're in phase 4, for example, that's the next least restrictive phase after the first 3 phases, you're going to be required to wear masks. Kids that are in grades pre-K through 12 have to wear masks all the time in hallways or outdoors. Kids that are grades 6 through 12 wear masks all the time. And younger kids, because they're going to be in classrooms generally together for the entirety of the day, are required to wear masks when they're outside, but not when they're in the classrooms. And although it's not required, it's highly recommended that in those classroom settings, social distancing is observed. So that's kind of an example of the things that are required depending on what phase you're in.
Okay, so those are the requirements for the students, the staff, and the teachers. So with all of those requirements and the strongly recommended, are teachers going to have new responsibilities surrounding this?
So that's a really good question. And everybody is actually going to have new and more responsibilities, right from the superintendent, the school board members on down. When it comes to teachers, though, yes, they're going to have additional responsibilities that go with enforcing, for example, the mask requirements in schools. Those would be akin to enforcing your code of student conduct. If a student is acting out in the hallway or not wearing clothing that is appropriate given the student code of conduct, then the mask requirement enforcement follows from that. Teachers are going to be required to ensure that the desks and work surfaces be cleaned between classes. And that's going to be undertaken different ways in different school districts, but still as the load-bearing teacher for that classroom, that's going to be a requirement that those teachers have. So they're going to be required to help the school district implement the response plan and the required and highly recommended activities. But those requirements will not and should not, in any school district, take them away from their primary responsibility, which is always to provide high quality instruction. So in plan design and in putting these plans together and in consulting with the internal stakeholders that school districts do, I can tell you, as somebody that's been consulting with school districts on that, the one thing that districts are doing is paying primary attention to that primary role of teachers and then trying to build around it in a way that's feasible for the teacher.
Okay. So with COVID-19 and the requirements, and there could be some issues where some students or teachers aren't comfortable coming back to the classroom. So can teachers work from home, or can students stay home and take their classes online?
Absolutely. So this is a great question too, because it really gets to the heart of, I think it's the elephant in the room, which is the anxiety that a lot of people are carrying about COVID-19. So let's deal with students first. Students can avail themselves to online instruction for the school districts that offer that. And after the last set of executive orders requiring specific learning plans from school districts, most school districts, if not all school districts, have really good online instruction programs that they're going to be offering. So students can avail themselves to those or any other alternate online platforms that are out there if they're just not comfortable coming back to school. Teachers, bottom line for teachers is that if we're doing in-person instruction, they need to show up for work. If they have a medical reason, just like in the old days, pre-COVID, I guess is the old days now, if they have a medical reason for not being able to work directly in school, they should bring that medical reason and supporting documentation to the school administration, and we'll look at that. And we'll look at that the same way that we did in the pre-COVID days under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. We'll look at that in terms of, okay, can an accommodation be made for the disability that's being asserted? And how can that accommodation be made for the teacher to be comfortable? And that is an interactive process that we go through to determine, one, if the accommodation can be made, and two, what burdens that accommodation may place on the school district.
Okay. This seems like there's so much involved with these preparedness plans and any possible accommodations that need to be made. So going back to the executive order, what are the benchmark dates that must be adhered to?
So the most important date to remember for the executive order and for the return to school roadmap, if you want to access that information, is August 17th. By August 17th, the plan itself must be posted on the school district website. And by the plan, I mean for each phase that the school district is in, the plan will say what activities the school district is undertaking to deal with that phase. And it will also say what highly recommended activities from the list in the roadmap are being left out of the plan for the reopening process.
Okay. Any of your client districts that you're working with, are they running into any obstacles or hurdles? Do they have any concerns about meeting these benchmark dates?
So the biggest concern really is not about meeting the date. There are a number of really good thought leadership organizations like the Michigan Association of Intermediate School District Administrators that have put out template plans. So school districts can not start from zero when they're putting these things together. They can fill in based on what the local needs are, but they can actually be using that within a framework so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. The biggest anxiety that I run into with my school district clients, my administrator clients, and I've run into at the bargaining table, frankly, is what's going to change next? Everything is in a state of flux with regards to COVID-19. If the science changes drastically, there could be a significant change in what we're doing. If we think that we're in a phase which is further along, like say we think we're in phase 4 or 5 in a particular region and the infections spike, we might find ourselves having to adapt on the fly and go back to a lower phase like phases 1 through 3. So we just need to retain some flexibility within the rubric that the plan gives us, but also pretty much expect that just as in the past several months, things are going to change and they're going to change rapidly.
Yeah, that is the key takeaway here. Be flexible and be adaptable. So with that said, are there any final thoughts that you have for attorneys and parents, or attorneys who happen to be parents dealing with a rapidly changing situation?
Well, I think that is probably the thought that I'd like to stress the most, is the situation is rapidly changing. So for lawyers that are looking at this, the best resource is always going to be the school district's webpage, where the plan will be posted so they can take a look at that. You know, if you're representing school districts, the best place you can look is the school district webpage to see where the plan is posted and see what the components of that plan are. As a parent, I think, and I'm a parent myself, so as a parent, I think that as we look to the reopening plans themselves, please go to your school district's webpage, pull down that reopening plan, take a look at it, read it yourself, but also read it with your student so that you can gauge how that plan is going to be implemented. And of course, if you have questions, direct them to the school district administration. All of the school district clients I work with are realize that we're building this thing on the fly. It's like building a plane while it's flying, as I've said before. And all of them have the patience to want to explain to parents their decision making, how they've gotten to those decision points and why. So that's what I would urge parents to do, is be an active consumer of that plan and then ask questions if you have them. The school board members, the school administration, they will answer those questions. I'm highly confident.
Fantastic. All right. Joe Urban, member in the Birmingham office of Clark Hill, thanks so much for your time today. I do appreciate it.
No, thank you.
All right. Take care and have a great day.
Bye now.